Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another episode of Second to Saints. John Hendrick alongside Ross Jackson. We're both in Charlotte right now. We had good little travel days. I guess mine was okay. I've been up since 3:45 this morning, which is Saturday morning, I guess, if you will. But Ross, how are you doing? I'm sure you fared out better.
Was it your flight after mine?
No, I went out at 7. So
yeah, I went out at 6. I got up like almost an entire hour later than you.
That's crazy. Well, I got direct, so
I tempt fate when it comes to flights, though. I like to cut it real short. Walked in the airport, got through security, and then walked right up as the flight was boarding.
Yeah, that's crazy. Because it was busy this morning when I walked in, and I'm like,
yeah, same.
Even the TSA pre-check, and I'm like, oh, pre-check plus clear, less than 5 minutes through. And that's
Dub.
Yeah, clear dub. Hopefully,
but good, man.
This weekend from this team too. A lot to discuss here. I think we could probably start with the latest move because they had a bunch of them, right? And we expected some of these. Just out saying obviously that some of the guys could be candidates for IR. We knew Bub Means was going to miss some time with a high ankle sprain, so he goes to IR. Kendre Miller back on IR with his hamstring injury. Waive Kyle Hergel. Then they signed Shamar Jean-Charles to the roster. Not surprising there. Jordan Mims. And then who's the one I'm forgetting? Golly.
Miller Bradford.
Miller Bradford, right. He finally gets his shot. That's good. Good
about
for
time.
Him. And and then they elevated Roderick Teamer and Trey Herndon for the game. So a lot of moves. Bottom line is Kendre Miller's gone. Bub Means gone. I don't think they can return until December 8th. I think that's the week after the Rams game. Which I think they get McCoy back. Should be that December 1st, if not sooner.
Yeah, that's the expectation so far as that timeline post bye week. And in case you're wondering, it's 4 games you have to miss, not 4 weeks. So the bye week does not factor into the return timeline for Means and Miller. That's why they have to miss an extra game even after that bye week. The other move that has a little bit of an impact here too is Jamal Williams, running back, being downgraded to out for this one. So what that pretty much means is where the run game is going to come from when it comes to the New Orleans Saints. It's going to be Alvin Kamara, it's going to be Taysom Hill, and maybe we see Jordan Mims get some more opportunities here this weekend as well, especially if there's a big deficit by the end of this one like there was the last time these two teams met.
Yeah, look, I would think they have to. I know they've tried this thing before, but this team, the way these injuries have gone, I mean, look, we've talked about this till we're blue in the face. I think the biggest thing for fans is why are they waiting till week 9 to be like, okay, this is a problem, let's address it. You know what I mean? Like they're like, they're sound saying, well, we're going to make those fixes and corrections next week. Like that probably should have been a long time ago, right? Like, I mean, it just seems like it's just a byproduct of how the season is gone.
Yeah. And then to hear that the in-practice injuries are not because they're practicing harder, longer, different, anything like that. That makes you wonder, okay, well, then why are the practice injuries happening and all those other pieces? And so it's just, there's a lot of question marks still floating around the health of this team, the injury situations, all of this other stuff. And then now, of course, Kendre Miller ends up on injured reserve for the second time this season. The NFL adjusted the rules this offseason. You can come back twice in a year now from injured reserve, including in the playoffs. But that if he were to end up back on injured reserve after that for a third time, his season would be over. So I think that's another big question mark that you get from all of these moves is what's the future of Kendre Miller and the New Orleans Saints at this point? Because the guy's got less than 100 career carries or whatever, and has been on injured reserve. This is now his third time, I believe, on injured reserve, last year and then twice now this year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they put him on injured reserve, was it? Because remember he was out, and I don't know if they put him on IR, because I think we kept asking. He's like, didn't he? It wasn't he supposed to, but he missed a lot of time because he left that Bears game and didn't come out to the finale. I don't remember if they put him on IR. I feel like they didn't, but you could be right.
Yeah, I'm
I
trying
could
to
be
check it
wrong.
real quick.
Yeah, you check,
Yeah, he
double
was just
check.
inactive. He was just inactive for
Yeah,
a
it was
long
just
time.
inactive.
Inactive,
Yeah,
inactive,
I can
inactive,
remember
inactive.
because it was a weekly question. It's like, why is this guy
Right.
not on IR? You know what I mean? Like, what purpose? You could have gave that roster spot to somebody else. But this team, they've got a lot of things to worry about. And of course, these roster moves. I mean, you mentioned Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara. I would expect Jordan Mims to get some looks on special teams for sure, because Kendre Miller was a part of some of the special teams work that you did. And, Taysom Hill is a guy that's a returner. I don't think you can use him in that aspect. So I'm actually really, a little bit intrigued to see how they break that down. I mean, at this point, you definitely have to give Mims some carries. And you remember this game last year when they played the Panthers in week 2, you had Tony Jones Jr. running the ball, right? Like, it was, I mean, for those who don't remember, I know that was a long time ago when they were 2-0 in that season, but yeah, that's right. It's going to be an interesting game plan, but they get number 4 back. Carr's back this week. Marquez Scantling. I'm going to butcher his name. I'm sorry, Marquez. But he's going to be able to play in this game too, and he expects to contribute in this game. But look, this is the Panthers, a lowly team. They have to win this game. They should win this game. I just don't know if they're going to win this game in some aspects because of everything that's happened. Like, what do you make of this offense?
Yeah, I mean, on the offensive side for this team, I think that they should be able to be okay here. The Carolina Panthers, they don't generate a lot of pressure. They have it's the second lowest pressure rate and the second lowest sack percentage in the NFL. They're not good in coverage. They aren't good in run defense. Like, everything about Carolina says that the New Orleans Saints offense, which is healthier now than it has been, even if you consider the Kendre Miller and Jamal Williams injuries having them out in this game, they're still healthy on this offense. There's still Taysom Hill back. You've got Alvin Kamara. You've got Chris Olave, Marquez Valdez-Scantling set to make his debut. All these other pieces, all the tight ends are available, everything like that. So they're healthier on their offensive line than they have been in some time, and they get their quarterback back. So I think that they're okay on offense, and so they should match up well here. The big thing is going to be, do they get in their own way? And that's what we saw against Atlanta. That's what we saw to an extent against Kansas City, although I don't mean to diminish Kansas City in terms, they're 7-0, they're undefeated for a reason, but the Saints kind of shot themselves in the foot in the opportunities that they did have, especially late in the game. We saw a bit of that up against Philly as well. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is the Saints' biggest competition on the offensive side of the football is going to end up being themselves more than it will be the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, look, I think we talked about it. I wrote about it, but 12 points in the last 90 minutes. That's the last 6 games in first quarter. I mean, that's like, they got to get it going. The formula is not hard. Put some points up on the board. You have not been good in the first quarter. You're usually behind in the first quarter. I mean, this is a team that, I don't want to say if you want to build your confidence or anything like that, because look, fans don't care. Like, even if you win this game, nobody cares. Like, what? You beat up on the lowliest team. Like, you better convincingly win against this team, because if you struggle and you come in and limp and barely get a win, then you got a lot of problems. But look, I think the offensive game plan is pretty simple. I think they can run the ball. I think they can dictate the time of possession here. I think with Carr, he's going to be able to rip it. I mean, there's no limitations. He's off the injury report with the oblique. He feels good. I think that they're going to catch more of a rhythm. I think when you say get out of their own way, something that comes to mind for me is the pre-snap penalties and the holding penalties, because that is what killed them last week. 50 yards in penalties. Not all of them counted, but 3 holding calls. Illegal block above the waist, a false start, and then I think there was a legal man downfield. Like, that's the type of stuff we say they got to get out of their way too. But it's a big deal for a team that's been playing undisciplined too.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of those games where you have to show that, because if you lose this game, the conversation gets very loud. The questions become big. That's a really tough one. You lose a 7th game in a row. In any case, that's going to be tough to navigate. But a 7th game in a row to the NFL's worst team at 1-7, and a team that you demolished to open up the season, that's going to cause a lot of. There's going to be a lot of consequence to that, I'll just say. And so on top of that, though, as you mentioned, you're not going to prove anything by winning this game. And in fact, I agree with your point. You could actually lose for winning if you don't win convincingly enough in this situation. If this is a 2-point win where you have to gut it out, no one's going to say, oh, well, it's a divisional game and divisional games are weird.
No.
Everyone's going to say that was the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young back at quarterback on top of that. We'll get the defense in that matchup here in a little bit, but that's going to be a part of the narrative here as well. So I completely agree with you. I think that I wrote that this is not a must win, but instead it's more of a mustn't lose for this team, because that's really what this one feels like.
Yeah, I mean, hypothetically, let's play this out. If they lose this game somehow, because I think most of the fans, I mean, everybody's like, they're fed up, right? We know everybody's frustrated. And of course, the Saints, and the way they're talking, nobody's more frustrated than them. Well, you know, I get that. I understand. But, it's just kind of been the same thing. But let's just say they do lose this game. I'm going on a tangent here. I don't know how you justify keeping Dennis Allen in role. I just don't. I just don't see how that happens. Now, I know the Saints aren't one to make drastic midseason changes. Obviously, look, we've talked about it plenty. I don't know what week we went back. I think even in the offseason, Ross, we talked about, we never got the sense that Dennis Allen is out after this year regardless. We've been telling you guys that for months, and I hate to burst a bubble, but I think he gets a pass this year. I know they got to play better football, but, let's say they lose this game. Do you expect drastic change?
If they lose this game, I think drastic change would be warranted. I think drastic change would be deserved, right? In terms of it would stand to reason that drastic change would be there. But I can't sit here and say that the New Orleans Saints would make that move. They just don't strike me as the organization that's willing to do that, that's ready to do that, anything like that. Now, I will say, up until the 2 weeks before Pete Carmichael was let go, it always kind of, everything was about how they were going to evaluate, they were going to look at stuff, but never really anything that firmly gave you the sense that they were going to move on from Pete Carmichael. You could say the same thing about Haslett back in 2005, 2004, or 2004 going into that 2005 season. And so I will say that there is something here to where it's like no general manager is going to go up there and do anything other than publicly back their head coach, publicly back the people that are around. Obviously that's going to be the case. And so that could be more of the trying to keep the band together because the band's together right now, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's trying to keep the band together in terms of what's marching forward if things get off to a sour note or continue here to a sour note. I just tried to get more musical things in there for you. And so, there you go. And so that's kind of the way that I look at it. I would certainly say that it would be justified. It would be warranted. You'd have every reason to do it, all that. My question is not whether or not it should happen, because I think it's pretty clear what that answer is. But my question is whether or not it will happen in terms of would the Saints actually pull the trigger on that?
Yeah. And look, I think there's fallout from it too. I mean, regardless, I mean, the Saints have said they're not a sell mode right now. Right. Which again, Loomis said, we're not going to trade half the roster, but you can trade some of your pieces. They are going to take calls. I know Chase Young's names have been floated around there. I know Marshawn Lattimore's. I think the problem is with the way some of these contracts are and just the way it's constructed. I don't know that they're going to get a top pick or anything like that for some of these players as well. I just think that it's you really kind of have set yourself up into this boat in a way. And again, trade deadline is November 5th. It's Tuesday for those who need to know. It's at 3 p.m. Central Time. I'd be surprised if the Saints make any trades, as far as acquiring people. If they trade out some people, it might be something maybe mid-tier, lower tier guys that just you can maybe get an extra day 3 pick. Do you have any other thoughts maybe on what they might do at the trade deadlines? It's, we're talking about Panthers game without talking about the Panthers game, as always.
Yeah. No. I think that the thing when it comes to the trade deadline, and really look, here's the thing about the Panthers game, right? The Panthers game sets all of this conversation up, right? In terms of where things go after that game. So I would say that the moves that would have made sense to me would be ones where you're, shipping off, you're trying to get Nephi Sewell back. Maybe there's a linebacker you could move for a day 3 pick or something like that. So maybe there's some situations there. But the issue on those types of conversations is, it's easy to make those decisions where you're healthy. which is a very limited number of position groups in terms of where the Saints are healthy. I mean, even making moves toward the bottom of their cornerback depth chart is now no longer no longer viable because you don't have Paul Sidibe for the rest of the season. Marshawn Lattimore is out for right now. Kool-Aid McKinstry is dealing with a hamstring injury. Rico Payton's dealing with a back injury, for Rico. Yeah. And so he's questionable. There's a chance he plays on Sunday, but he also didn't practice all week. And so are you really going to put an undrafted free agent rookie, as good as we know Rico Payton has been and can be, are you going to really put him out there in an NFL regular season game to start opposite Alontae Taylor on no practice? I don't know if you're going to do that when you have a guy that was drafted in 2018 coming off your practice squad in Trey Herndon. So I kind of look at it that way, to where like there maybe is some of those, or are some of those maybe smaller moves that they could make, but because of the injuries at the top of many of those position groups, the pickings are few and far between.
Yeah, I think a guy that comes to mind for me is probably Willie Gay Jr. I think he's somebody that could play. We said he could play extremely well in this, but he only got 21 snaps against the Chargers, and I get it. Some of that was dictated by the matchup, but I just don't think they've used him in the way they needed to. And even when they have, I could see it too. Like if they brought Nephi Sewell back, they're not going to cut Anthony Orji. They're not going to cut DeMarco Jackson. Like they like those two guys too much on the side. So again, we don't know 100%, but it also could make sense. Somebody like that they just acquired. I mean, other free agents, I know Jawan's a free agent. I don't think they would move off of him. I mean, there's just so many different ones that they have that are set up to be free agents. But look, they're not going to make huge splashes. Like I'd be surprised if they're linked to any big names. They shouldn't be linked to any big names.
No, it certainly shouldn't be
They should. They've said it already. Like nobody's coming from the outside to save us. It's all in-house, all this other stuff.
Yep.
So look, that's just kind of where it's at. Well, when we come back, we're going to preview the defense and talk more about this good old-fashioned slobber knocker. Hey folks, John Hendricks here, Second and Saints. Wanted to talk to you quickly about Underdog because it is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players by just selecting higher or lower on 2 or more player stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. This season, Underdog is going to be running a special promo or bonus almost every single day, like profit boosts, discounts, or free picks. Plus, all new users get a free pick. You could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats like passing yards, interceptions, touchdowns, and much more. Create entries with all football selections or mix and match across your favorite sports. Underdog puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the Win Now button to cash out whenever you want. And with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose. With Underdog's Double Flex option, you can even take 2 L's and still have your entry to be a win. So go download the app today and use code SECONDSAINTS to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's code SECONDSAINTS. Now here comes the legal jargon. Must be 18 or older, 19 and older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 and older in Colorado for some games, 21 and older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Man, that guy talks like the Micro Machines, dude.
That's incredible.
Does it. Yeah, definitely. Well, back on Second and Saints, Ross, we were talking about, this slobber knocker that you so loved, that phrase for sure.
I do love that phrase.
Yeah, and I'm a huge wrestling fan back in the day, like the Attitude Era, all that fun stuff.
Same.
But at any rate, so Bryce Young, we know what it is with Bryce Young. They traded away Deontay Johnson. They as in the Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
Defensively, you've got pretty much your front seven, but on the back end, cornerback, Alontae Taylor is your only healthy cornerback. Shamar Jean-Charles, somebody we saw in walkthroughs, presumably if Rico Payton can't go, he would be over there on the side with Alontae Taylor. But the way things go on this team, is this a chance where Bryce Young actually gets a sense to where he can get a rhythm, or is this about the pass rush getting home? I mean, because being down 3 corners, checks notes, math. That's not good.
yeah, not good at all. I think the biggest thing that will, much like the offense for New Orleans, the biggest thing that will get in their way is themselves. Biggest thing for Bryce Young that will get in his way is himself, right? And so really for Carolina, what I'm going to be keeping an eye out on is going to be the run game and how it potentially supports Bryce Young. They traded away, as you mentioned, Deontay Johnson, who was the team's leading wide receiver at just over 300, I think just over 350, 300 receiving yards. And so their next best wide receiver right now is rookie Xavier Legette, who's dealing with a toe injury that he suffered. I believe it was midweek during the practice week. And so it's going to come down to, can Bryce Young, first of all, does Bryce Young have Xavier Legette to his full disposal? And what's the connection between those two guys look like? I think that is your scoring potential in the passing game if you're the Carolina Panthers. And so for New Orleans, the biggest thing you have to eliminate is going to be the explosive plays. And they did a good job of that the first week against the Carolina Panthers. That's something that they've struggled with here over the last couple of weeks. And it'll be interesting to see sort of how the health at cornerback ends up impacting that. Because what we've seen a lot of times so far this season is that those big explosive plays happens when a cornerback misses a tackle. And then all of a sudden it's, this big, wide open breakout run type of a situation. So those are the things you got to be watching for is, can Bryce Young and Xavier Legette dial up some of these explosive plays that maybe gets the New Orleans Saints offense kind of off balance a little bit.
Yeah, and no debut for Jonathan Brooks. It's going to be Chuba Hubbard again,
right.
Which, he can carry the ball. He can do exceptionally well, but, look, Denver took it to him last week. Again, with Bryce Young at the home, if you give up big plays to Bryce Young, like just pack it in. Again, that's no disrespect to Bryce Young, but you just can't. And again, it sets the Saints up to where you can at least get a game where you can feel confident. Like say, hey, we at least know how to win, but defensively, just got to finish plays. Like, I think that's the biggest thing is you got to be able to get Bryce Young down. You got to be able to get a pass rush going. You got to be able to stop the run. The passing game might not be ideal. And look, they just got to play. They got to execute, right? I think that's when you look at both sides of the ball and, you look at the third down numbers from last week, offensively, it was just horrendous. You got one. I expect that to change, but defensively, weren't so hot on some of those too. You got some pass interference calls. I could see Bryce Young trying to take some deep shots there and draw some of those to help set up the Panthers. But at the end of the day, this could be a punt fest, right? Like this really could be a punt fest. What else do they have to do defensively? I know Bryce Young, the run game, and of course Xavier Legette. That's a big one. But anything else that you feel like that we might be missing here?
The other thing that I want to mention is Andy Dalton practiced full all week with that right thumb injury that happened in that car accident. Thankfully, no other issues. He had his family in the car, but it seems like everybody was okay. And so having that right thumb injury is kind of what sidelined him last week against the Denver Broncos. Bryce Young came in through 2 interceptions in that game. Going into this game, though, Andy Dalton did practice all week. So I think one of the other things to kind of watch here is what's the lead and leeway on Bryce Young, knowing that they could potentially go to Andy Dalton. We'll see if he's active on game day. I imagine that he will be. He could be inactive in an emergency quarterback. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to go about it. But if he is indeed healthy enough to at least be the backup quarterback to Bryce Young, I imagine that Dave Canales and the Carolina Panthers, who could maybe smell a little blood in the water here, right? You're going up against a divisional opponent in your house, 6-game losing streak. You're going to have the guys that fly in and get and parachute into the stadium. Everybody's going to be hyped. Everybody that's in attendance, all that kind of stuff. Like there's something here to where if the Carolina Panthers feel like, okay, the Saints haven't pulled away, Bryce Young struggling, but this game is still in reach, or they have a lead, whatever, they could potentially feel very comfortable pulling Bryce Young and putting Andy Dalton in there. And dare I say about Andy Dalton, that could be the worst possible thing for New Orleans in that situation, because then you have the veteran quarterback that's now going after your very young, all of a sudden secondary, young and inexperienced, all of a sudden secondary, at least inexperienced in your system, outside of Alontae Taylor and Tyrann Mathieu. And then, Jordan Howden's just in his second year. So that's where that's the other kind of wrinkle that I'm watching for in this game. So I think that's something that I would bring up as well.
Very bold of you to think there's going to be a ton of fans at this game.
I know. I've realized that as I was saying it, and I was like, everything that I'm about to say, I knew because I said that everything that I said after that was going to mean nothing because I said that there were going to be fans in the stands at this game. But you know what? I know some Saints fans. I know some Saints fans that will be at this game and everything. So at least there will be that. Shout out to Nick Jennings. But like, there will be that. But yeah, no, I'm just waiting.
Yeah, come hell or high water, there are going to be Saints fans in attendance at least. But, you know,
yes.
As far as Panthers fans, I know that's kind of, they're just tired of seeing what they're seeing. And look, I don't blame them because I think the Saints are going to go through something similar when they play the Falcons next week. So we'll see on that one. But, you know, you brought up defensively. I think this is where I got to tell you, we hadn't talked a lot about Jordan Howden. But obviously him being in this role, I think Will Harris is getting closer to returning. But Jordan Harris, I'm combining them both. Maybe that will be a thing one day.
That's a good idea.
Howden, might be one of the superpowers. But the way Jordan Howden's playing, look, I know he's getting more confident because he's getting more reps. Your kind of assessment on him, because I feel like not many people are really talking about him. And I get it. The defense isn't playing great, but I think he deserves a little bit of love.
Yeah, absolutely. I think his performances have gotten better and better and better throughout. You can look at any grading metric and you can see a positive uptick, particularly over the last few weeks when he's gotten the most snaps that he's had. 76 snaps up against Tampa, 65 up against Denver, and 66 last week up against the Chargers. He's looked really good. 0 missed tackles during that time. He's allowing just a 66.7 completion percentage when he's the closest defender, which has been on looks like 5 targets during that time, allowing just 2 catches for 18 yards. So he's played very well. And actually, here's my favorite stat about him so far. His passer rating when targeted is a 39.8 thus far. And remember, that's only tracked from when he's targeted. That's not like including, the zeros that might pile up when he's not being targeted and things like that. And so in coverage, he's performed well for this New Orleans Saints team. And I think one of the big reasons why is because of sort of what you've seen him doing a bit more of this year than what you saw last year. Last year, when he was called upon, he was playing down in the box a lot. Yep. This year, 171 snaps at free safety covering over the top and only 91 snaps down in the box. And really, still played heavily in the box over the course of the last 3 games. Last 2 games in particular, over 20 snaps in the box, but over 40 snaps a couple weeks ago, and then over 20 snaps in each of the last couple weeks when it comes to playing sort of that deep away from the line of scrimmage type of role. So they've done a good job of getting him comfortable in the box, but also allowing him to play to what was inherently his strength as kind of that post safety or deep safety as a single high middle of the field guy.
Yeah, and I think the reason I bring it up is because I know a lot of things aren't going right for the Saints. But when you talk about development of younger players, obviously let's talk about Mickey Loomis's comments, right? Like he was talking about the younger players and stuff, thinking like not necessarily great players, like all this other stuff. He name drops some of the players, right? Like it's interesting. He put Chase Young in there, and then there was another player, and I'm like, they're free agents after this year, so it's like
he put Paulson Adebo in the conversation.
Paulson Adebo, he's also a free agent, which I think they can get Adebo back because of his injury, and I think in some aspects, I think they could get Chase Young back. It's just a matter, can they do it? Will they do it? And does Chase Young want to be here? I could see both, but your thoughts on what Loomis had kind of said on their talent, that young talent, because Howden's in there, like he's may not get a lot of name recognition, but he's one that's getting a lot more experience and is learning on the fly too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to what Marcus Robertson told me in an interview with him last year when we were both over at Saints News Network, actually, and I wrote a piece about it around one of the things that he said as he walked away from me after the interview was, we're going to have another one of these conversations in a couple years, and we're going to be talking about how good that kid is. Like, that's how excited he was about Jordan Howden, his rookie year. And so I think you see that from these individual sort of position coaches. I can think of, Keith Williams and his wide receiver coach heaping praise on Bub Means. You think about Anthony Orji and the way that he's come along so far this season. You look at Rico Payton, you look at Alante Taylor, who's still on a rookie contract. Rico Payton, of course, a rookie himself. There is a lot of young talent with a lot of potential on this team. It might not be something that's gonna, you put a whole 22 list of starters out there in 2024, it's probably not going to pan out for you. But in terms of how you can develop these guys, there's a lot of the sort of seeds that need to be planted, the tools that need to be there, all that when it comes to it. So I think this team should be looking at their roster that way and looking at their young talent, understanding what they have, sort of taking stock on what they have talent wise for those younger players, because those younger players are the ones that are going to be kind of that new era, right? We've always talked about kind of the 2-year transition that this team is set up for. John, you talked about that with the extension to DeMario, the extension to Tyrann Mathieu. You can see it in the Alvin Kamara contract as well, sort of what that sort of flow of this year, next year, and 2026 would look like. It's going to be a lot of those young guys that are going to be called upon, and more young guys on the way. So I think it's a viable, and I think I would say pragmatic way of looking at the roster, which is evaluating that young talent. And the Saints are going to be able to do a little bit more of that in this game against Carolina.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, regardless of how this year pans out, they've got to hit on their draft next year. Like, we just know that, right? Like, I mean, I know that some of the younger players, like, they are getting like the Anthony Orgies, and he was an undrafted guy. They were getting Nephi Sewell before that. DeMarco Jackson was a day 3 pick. Like, they can hit on some of these picks. It just does take some time. And I guess it's just one of those, it's like you look at how the roster is constructed, all this other stuff. I mean, I think if you can give some of these guys some time, they don't want to just abandon and just go away from them, right? Like, I think that they're trying to legitimately do that. And you see it. Like, we saw Anthony Orgy blowing up in training camp. Like, he was not somebody we could stop talking about. Like, you know what I mean? But I think the young players here, like, I know that you look at it and say, well, what cornerstones do they really have to build off of? I mean, that's hard to say when it's a young team like that. I don't know if you necessarily have that answer, but at the same time, I think that they can move in that direction. But we don't know if it's going to be Dennis Allen head coaching that, or Mickey Loomis still running the show. I presume it's going to be both, but it's a fascinating thing. Locker room.
And there could be changes. There could be changes elsewhere on the coaching staff too. I mean, look, the Saints defensive line has not performed up to standard. What does that mean for Todd Grantham going into next year? So there's other Hodges. Right. Michael Hodges could always get hired away. Right. So like there's all these little other kind of mechanisms that could be in, out, changed, whatever, that end up kind of impacting the development of the youth and all that sort of stuff for good reasons, for bad reasons. I real quick, one other young player, obviously, that has performed very well that hasn't taken a lot of time is Taliesin Fuanga. I know he had a rough game a couple weeks ago. He was always going to have one or a few of those games, especially his rookie year. But I mean, he panned out very quickly so far. And so that's another guy. I always get worried when we start listing players like, oh, this one, that one, who we don't name. And then what that means, we probably just forgot somebody. But Fuanga is definitely one that deserves to be mentioned in that category as well.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Brzee would be the other one. I think
that was the other one I was thinking about. Yeah,
there is a lot of it. I'm sorry if they happen to tune into the show and we forget you. My bad. Our bad. So
Matthew Hayball, the punter, right? You got to shout him out on there too. Like there's yeah, man. He had more punt yards than the Saints had, I think, total yards last week. So like, yeah.
I told you guys. I told you in training. He was the guy, man. I told you. So as we kind of wrap up here, the locker room. That's been a big topic of discussion because Dennis Allen talking about the meeting with the captains. They had this order in type thing experience, and they're saying we're good. Fans challenging that.
Sure.
And then I'm sure you saw with Alante Taylor's comments, like maybe tells a different story. Truth lies somewhere in the middle, but I don't think you get the sense that say, well, they're just all good because they've lost 6 straight games. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but of course, many people are saying, well, what is the coach supposed to say? You know what I mean? Like the locker room's bad. And I don't think we'll ever hear that, but just your take on the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are in there. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of animosity going on in the locker room or anything like that. Like, it doesn't feel that way to me. It doesn't feel tense. Doesn't feel like pressure. There's still music. Guys are still talking and joking around and stuff like that. We saw like the 3 former Raiders. Yeah, we saw like all the former Raiders kind of talking to one another at one point earlier this week and stuff like that. Like, you can see all that like all across the locker room. I think the thing that's more important than what is said is what isn't said, right? Or what's more important than what you are hearing is what you aren't hearing. And so you look at, let's say, this pertains to this game, actually. Xavier Woods, the safety from the Carolina Panthers, who went off on, people in the media about, we saw you, we saw what you were talking about, we saw y'all talking bad about us, all this other stuff and everything after they beat the Raiders. Now, they've lost every single game since he did that. But the thing about that is that, like, you saw that outward display of, I'm upset with the way that we're being talked about, and we're upset with the way that blah, blah. You saw, was it Trayvon Diggs earlier this week, right? Yeah, like clapping back at a reporter as right after losing a game, like Twitter was the most important thing in that moment. Jerry Jones going on radio and threatening people's jobs. Nick Sirianni bringing his kids up for for press conferences and stuff like that. Like, it's those things that you don't see in New Orleans, and like people that are critical of the idea of, like, or that challenge it by saying, like, well, what is he supposed to say? Of course they're going to say that everything's good. You're right. Like, of course they're going to say that everything's good. But at the same time, it's the stuff that you're not hearing, the stuff that you're not seeing, that are more important than what you might write off as like coach speak or player speak or kind of being, what's the phrase? PC, if you will, in terms of like trying to be like, media friendly or whatever. It's the fact that you're not seeing the media, the non-media friendly things popping out at any point. And I don't when I say non-media friendly things, I don't mean the relationship between us as the media and them. I just mean things in the media that are bringing these other things to light.
Yeah, we haven't seen tirades in the locker room or anything, like nothing like that. Like, it just hasn't been. Now, of course, it's frustrated, and the thing is, for this team, I hate to say it, but they've also become accustomed to losing. So it's not like it's a real new feeling for them. You know what I mean? Like, it's something that they have had. And look, I think the locker room, everybody is what it is. They're trying to figure out how to get this thing on the right side, because I think they had all the confidence in the world in training camp, all the confidence in the world in the 2-0 game. I think Philly's obviously their Green Bay game. Like, I just think that that's kind of what's happened here a bit. And then, of course, the injuries have happened. They just can't seem to get healthy, can't stay healthy. A lot of that started in training camp. I just think my biggest thing here is, if they lose against the Panthers, I would expect the locker room to kind of come. Like, you can't just filter and say, okay, well, we're just going to go give it the old college try. Like, we're going to go back to work. Like,
yeah. We'll give them next week.
Show some emotion. Like, I honestly want that. Like, you should be mad. You should be pissed off. And I think that's one of the things that I wrote about on Saints News is, at some point, you got to stop wasting DeMario Davis's time, Cam Jordan's time, Tyrann Mathieu's time, and Alvin Kamara's time. Like, they are winners, right? Like, this team should be winners. You can't keep wasting those guys' time. Like, and if it's not the right people, you just got to get it to change. And I don't know, again, we don't get the sense, but something has to change. I mean, they stopped the players from parking in the media lot. Like, I know that was a story that Jeff Duncan rolled with. We were kind of like dumbfounded when we rolled up on Wednesday and saw that they weren't there because of all the spaces, but like, it's a thing. It's something that happened. You know what I mean? And so maybe it's a step in the right direction of making sure they get the message. I don't know, but I think people are just tired of losing. People are just kind of like, whatever with this team, it's not going to change. And maybe fair. I think that's part of it. Maybe you have a right to feel that way based on the evidence.
The apathy doesn't come without being earned, right? Like, especially when it comes to fans who will go, to the edge of the earth to typically, especially New Orleans Saints fans, after the standard that they've become accustomed to seeing on the field, go to the edge of the earth to say, no, this team will turn it around, right? Remember 2014, 15, 16, every week was about how they're going to turn around. How they're going to turn around, how they're going to turn around. But 6-game losing streak is uncharted territory for a lot of those, for a lot of people that are used to that standard. Now, a lot of people who go all the way back to, being Saints fans since the 60s, since the 70s, since, the late 80s, early 90s, don't control all this stuff. Right. Yeah. All of them are like, yeah, all right, well, we've seen this before. We've been through it. We'll navigate it. Everything like that. But like, that's part of the fan base, just like a part of the fan base is now accustomed to the winning standard. And I think there's also a lot of fans that were around from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, that are also now accustomed to the winning standard as well, right? Like that saw that and were like, oh, this is great, And so I think there's something about like knowing that it has happened, it can happen, all those other things. And so to see the apathy, apathy doesn't come without warrant, doesn't come without it being earned. And so I think like that's kind of my take on it, is like when you look at all that, like this is kind of uncharted territory for this team in a way, right? The 6-game losing streak, the potential of a 7-game losing streak would be the first time since 1999. Now we're getting into, Ditka comparisons and all these other things, like not the company you want to be in terms of conversation.
Right. 4% chance of making the playoffs right now. I'm like Jim Mora obviously comes to mind as like playoffs. Obviously, you guys know that. Right. I mean, it's a long way. And of course, week at a time, of course, they're looking at what's in front of them, not what's in back of them and stuff. They've got to win this game. Ross, do they win this game? And do they win it convincingly? I think that's the only two things, really.
That's it. Yeah, this has to be a blowout, just like week 1. Like not it has to, right? But like that's going to be the most convincing thing. And mind you, that will only convince so much, right? Which is that, okay, they can go out there and they can beat up on the teams that are worse than them. But we saw that last year too. And we saw that the year before. Like that's what this team typically did, was that they go out there and they beat the teams that are worse than them. You go out there and you lose to a team that's worse than you, then all of a sudden, like that conversation becomes very, very different.
Yeah. I'm going to take them 27-10. I think they're going to win. I think my version of convincingly is at least a 2-score game. You know what I mean? While they're at least controlling them a little bit, but they got to win this game. They hopefully do win this game. I just don't know. I don't know if I have the best feeling about it, but at the same time, again, you got a lot of work to do and you don't have a lot of time to do it in. And as of right now, you have almost no shot to make the playoffs. I mean, unless you magically can put together a run, which, let's face it, I don't think anybody's going to buy that, right? And so it's the NFL. Anything can happen, but, it's kind of where we're at, right? So I just don't know. I just can't believe we've got to this point. Like, honestly.
It's wild.
Hard writing the same thing over and over and over and over again from every year. Yeah. Like I could copy everything I did last year and paste it on this season. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. And I think they feel similarly too. I think the New Orleans Saints are going to do everything they can to make a statement at a game where there's no statement to be made. And so I think that this game is going to be like a 35 to 40 point output for the Saints. If they win it, I mean, 35 to 40 point output for the team. I don't know what Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers score. It depends on if it's Bryce Young the entire time, if it's Andy Dalton, if there's garbage time, all this other stuff. But I think if the Saints win this game, what a win looks like is what a statement win would look like if it were up against any other opponent. That's what I think that this game looks like. If the Saints lose this game, I think it's a low scoring punt battle like you were talking about, and the Saints, lose by a couple of points or something like that. I don't think that they get blown out, although we'll see. But depending on your definition of a blowout, I guess. But sure, that's the way that I see this one going. I have no idea which way it goes, but I think like those are the two versions. You're going to get either a close loss or a blowout win for New Orleans, which is again going to be an attempt to make a statement in a game where no statement is available. Like it's not going to be a statement win, but it's going to be. But if it is one, it's going to be one like a statement win, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, you're not.
I don't think you change the narrative with a win here.
Yeah, you're not moving the needle. Like you're getting a win to break the streak, but then again, you got Atlanta right around the corner, then Cleveland. So it's just one of those things where you've got a lot of things to prove here, and so it starts with Carolina. We're going to see if they do it. Ross, what you got coming up on LouisianaSports.net and Locked On Saints?
Yeah, man. So obviously game coverage and everything all throughout. We'll have gamer column after the game, inactives beforehand, all that good stuff. Got 5 things to know, just a couple of quick things to kind of help set the table if you've maybe disconnected from the team for the week and are now just kind of getting back into wanting to get caught up. I put out a 5 things to know, so you're all caught up there. We have matchups, stat comparisons, all that good stuff as well. And I'll have a kind of 3 key matchups to watch in this game with. Both these teams don't have a ton available to them going into this one. So it's a little bit challenging to find kind of like 3 that end up making the game, but it might be 3 that do indeed end up making this game. You know what I mean? So that's what we're going to dive into. And then all throughout the week, we'll take a look at, post-game coverage and then start to quickly turn the page over to the Atlanta Falcons back at home as the Saints get ready for their homestand. What you got coming up over at Saints News Network?
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen it, go to Saints News Network or si.com/NFL/Saints. We covered and talked about Nathan Shepard did get fined for that play against Justin Herbert. Is $11,817, and it was unnecessary roughness. No suspension, yet, or anything like that. But I know that was a controversial one. Of course, we're gonna have all our game day coverage and all the different moves that have happened, all that good stuff. And then trade deadlines right around the corner. I'm working on a trade deadline. Kind of an outlook for fans to know, just kind of see where this team's at, what to maybe not expect and expect. But it'll be fun as always. So it's hopefully when we talk about this team post game, it's going to be at least about a win. And then where do they go from here? Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They got to string them together. That's a big thing. That's what we haven't seen over the past couple of years. They haven't been able to string it together. That's got to be, that's the prove it. We'll come back to this in 6 weeks. See where they are then.
Absolutely.
I mean, no, we will be back. We will be back.
Well, we're here. We're here regardless.
We will be here after the game. But we'll continue that conversation in 6 weeks.
Yes, we will know very quickly. So, I mean, if they put together a run of 5-6 games, maybe, but it's going to come down to that one game. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it, but yeah, we'll see. Just win a game first, and then we'll talk. And we'll talk at you on Sunday after the game, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to Second and Saints. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button. Visit all the links in our descriptions, all that stuff. It's a great way that you can support the show. I'm just going to say support the show. You can't support the show yet. Haven't got all that merchandising yet, but maybe one day. But definitely support us. Appreciate you guys. As always, that is going to do it for us today. John Hendricks alongside Ross Jackson signing out for Second and Saints. As flat as it can go.
Oh, no.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Thanks.
Love you.